Hello viewers, and welcome to yet another Warhammer 40,000 Conquest video production. My name is Mitch, and I am the Hive Tyrant. Today I'm pleased to present you with another installment in my continuing series of Community Spotlight videos, in which I interview various prominent and upstanding members of the Conquest LCG community. In the past, we discussed guests' favorite decks and how best to pilot their preferred warlords. But, now that I've completed an initial interview and guest analysis for each and every one of our first 14 warlords, I now look to assess and explore the thus far spoiled warlords of our upcoming Planetfall cycle of war packs. So, expect a discussion that's steeped in theory, conjecture, and speculation to be sure, but hopefully through guests sharing their impressions, their opinions, all within the context of hundreds of games worth of experience, they'll be able to provide you with a wealth of information useful to both new and veteran players alike. Be sure to let me know what you thought of this interview in the comments section below, and as always, I remain ever open to constructive criticism. But with our introduction aside, let's get things started with the discussion of our upcoming Broderick War. Well, before I ask you about why exactly you brought that bolt pistol to the interview, why don't you introduce yourself and let our viewers know how you're involved in our Conquest community?
Definitely. My name is John King, and I'm part of the Traxis Sector War Cast with Tobin Lopez and Carl Anderton. We've been putting out episodes fairly regularly. I think we're up to 13 or 14 now, so it's been great. Really enjoy it. Really enjoy the game. Feedback from the community has been wonderful.
Well, definitely. I was going to say it's one of my favorite podcasts, but it's not like we have so many podcasts around. But I definitely enjoy it. Love hearing what you guys have to say, especially the whole lore component, and the fact that Carl used to work for a Games Workshop store. He really provides some unique insight as well, so hopefully I'll have him on at some point and round out the Traxis Sector crew, but it's
That would be great.
Awesome chance to finally get the opportunity to talk to you. Before we dive into our Warlord-centric content, just tell us a little about how you got involved in Conquest. Like, have you been playing the game since the beginning, or how did it all start?
I have been playing the game since the beginning. Like any good friend that is into gaming that wants to have a consistent meta, Tobin got me started. He you know, there's always the joke that the first one's free, right?
Right.
But Tobin went and played Conquest at Gen Con in 2014, and very, very excited about it. And he was telling me about it and said, okay, yeah, that sounds cool. At the time, I still am very heavily into Android Netrunner, and that was really going to just kind of be my game. I wasn't going to support, or I felt I couldn't support a second game. I would have loved to, obviously. But
Sure.
sometimes, you know, I have a wife, I have two children, so a lot of times my interests come last, if that makes sense.
Most definitely.
So he came home, I think, with 2 copies from Gen Con, and then when the game came out in 2014, he went ahead and bought 3 more, just to start handing them out and getting people involved so that he would have somebody to play with regularly.
It's a very, very insidious
Yeah,
move right
definitely.
there.
Oh, well, it's kind of funny. I started way back, or I started playing I played board games and role-playing games probably ever since I was 10 or 11, 12 years old. Board games even earlier than that. I started playing card games when Magic came out, and I had a roommate that, hey, let me show you this game. And so we shuffled up a couple of the decks, and he proceeded to beat my head in. And it's like, oh, okay, that's pretty cool. Let's do that again. And, played real Magic for like the next 3 years exclusively, and it seemed like. And there were other card games that came out, and the original Netrunner came out during that time, and that's actually how I met Tobin. We were all kind of involved in the same group that met up fairly regularly here up at Fort Collins. We were both going to school at the time. Oh, I was going to school. I'm pretty sure Tobin had finished, but he had finished and was living up here in Fort Collins as well.
Well, definitely. I mean, it sounds like you've got quite the extensive history when it comes to adversarial games, if not outright, competition. Are you much of a tournament player?
I love going to playing tournaments, but really more to meet people.
Sure.
This past, we've been having trouble meeting up because I actually went out to Gen Con this year. And it was my first time. Tobin and I went out, and I played in the Conquest Nationals out there. Met a bunch of great people. I actually got to meet Liz Millay. Sorry if I butchered your last name there, Liz, from the Tactical Squad. And she had a buzzsaw of a deck, and it was just wonderful playing her. She beat me, but it went down to the final planet. And so that's why I enjoy going to tournaments, is actually meeting everybody, seeing the ideas, getting the alternate promos and swag. I have done well in a few of them, able to get play mat and all that kind of stuff. But I'm more of wanting to have the experience of getting out there and playing people live and seeing what's out and just having a good time.
Right.
So
kind of
so I do
community aspect of it, just getting together with people, experiencing the entire thing.
Right, exactly, and that comes all the way back, even back from when I was playing Magic tournaments. I was usually the guy that had the weird deck. That when it worked great, and when it didn't, it crashed and burned gloriously.
Sure,
and
sure.
I seem to still do that with when I construct decks. I think it's unfortunate that some people may get locked into, some players may get locked into a certain idea that these are the best cards and these are the best decks, and they go to play them.
Right.
So there's a lot of Kato versus Kato. There's a lot of Zerathor versus Zerathor. And, I mean, those are great decks, and they win, obviously, because they're very consistent. They're very good cards, and they're piloted well by these players that have a lot of experience with it. But that's not everything that the game should be. It shouldn't always be, how am I going to dominate the next tournament? It's I think if you can step outside that, Conquest has a lot more to offer than just that. So, well, hopefully people watch this video and get excited about some of the things that they can do with maybe what they think aren't necessarily good cards.
Most definitely. I mean, probably the highlight of this community interview series is when some of the underappreciated warlords get some representation, and then I get to read in the comments section somebody saying, oh, I never really thought about old Zogwart like that. Gee, that sounds really interesting. Why don't I give it a try? Just because with our online community, information spreads so fast, it seems like once people start to frown upon a certain warlord or throw out the word like underpowered, then people just start to ignore it entirely and kind of demonize it, and it's just a vicious cycle, I think. But,
right.
You happen to mention your extensive card game history. Once Tobin managed to give you that initial taste of Conquest and, really start that jonesing for it, what keeps you addicted? What keeps you coming back to this game?
It is one of the best designed games that I've ever played. I usually, I'll play almost anything to try it. For me to buy a game, it really has to resonate with me, and this goes for board games or card games. Just because I enjoy gaming, so if somebody says, hey, let's play such and such board game. Right. I've never played it before. I'd love to try it. And then for something to resonate with me, it's usually, do I like the genre? Is it something that I'm interested in? I'm a longtime role player, so I like a lot of the anything that's kind of vaguely based around D&D, if you've got fighters, wizards, priests, that kind of thing. I'm also, I grew up and just really love military history. Matter of fact, when I was going to college, I was taking I was taking history classes to kind of keep myself sane, which when I said that to people, they just looked at me like I was insane. Like, why would you voluntarily take a history class you didn't need?
Right, right.
I just love how human history has been defined by the rise of empires, the fall of empires, and obviously military might is something that plays a key factor in the rise and fall of civilization throughout history. So when I started playing Conquest, the only thing I knew about Warhammer 40K in the beginning was it was kind of tongue-in-cheek. It was a War Games miniature. I say tongue-in-cheek because it's like, oh, okay, there's orcs, there's dwarves, there's elves, and you're in space. Okay, yeah, but I do like a whole lot of sci-fi. And so one of the things that appeals to me about Conquest is I like the idea of humanity existing in the future, continuing on, actually expanding. It kind of gives me hope for, planet Earth, that maybe one day it won't be just planet Earth, that maybe we will spread out to the stars. That's a pretty neat idea, and I like that. And then the military history, that everything that ties in how this, I see a lot of, especially with the Astra Militarum, a lot of things harkening back to the Roman Empire, the legions. We made a joke in one podcast that with Exterminatus, the U.S. at the end makes it Latin, right?
Right.
So it's I see that kind of stuff, and that really, yeah. So the lore and the genre appeal to me, and then like I said, Brad has designed a game that the mechanics on it are so wonderful, so tight. It really, really gets to that analytical gamer in me, going with the rule set, saying, okay, if I play this here at this time, then this opens up this opportunity to do this and this to here. And of course, there's always the reaction from your opponent and the back and forth. It just makes it a wonderful game. And then we started talking with Carl about it, who obviously then he had so much to offer with the lore that came from it, and said, Warhammer 40K might have been silly when it first started with the Noise Marines and their heavy metal guitars and the orcs and the dwarves and all that, but it really has morphed into something that is the width and the depth, the breadth of everything that comes with it just has made it into such a serious and unique setting. And I really feel like no matter what you can find, or no matter what interests you, you can find that now in Warhammer. Sure. I'm always constantly amazed by some of the stuff that comes out. So it's pretty just phenomenal. And he's really opened up my eyes to a lot of things. So I'm definitely appreciative, like you, of Carl and the lore segments. And I think that's one of the things that new players to Conquest, or even maybe players that are familiar with a lot of FFG living card games, they don't realize that there's all this behind it that you can just take as much as you want. If you want to dive into the deep end of the pool, it's there.
Definitely. It's almost as if there's 40,000 years or so of accumulated lore and rich, expansive universe out there. But, I mean, it really sounds like 40K touches on pretty much every interest you could possibly have. If you're curious about military history, there's the Imperium of Mankind. If you like the Roman Empire, Captain Cato Sicarius and his detachment of Ultramarines. And it doesn't end there. If you're a mycologist interested in studying fungus, there's the entire orc faction. So there's limitless possibilities, and the Tyranids aren't too bad either.
Oh yeah, but, the new Tyranids coming out, it's just phenomenal.
Sure, and they have to this day a very special place in my heart. But John, I've had you on today. I've covered our core set Warlords, I covered our initial Warpack cycle worth of Warlords. We've seen a lot of exciting spoilers. At this point, the Great Devourer has yet to hit store shelves, but we've nevertheless gotten a glimpse at 3 different upcoming Warlords as we record this video today. And you mentioned your schedule is nightmarishly busy sometimes. You hardly have time to enjoy the things you maybe not care about most, but your favorite leisure activities. Mm-hmm. One of our exciting upcoming Warlords is Broderick Worr of the Astra Militarum faction. What is the interest there? Like, what's special about him that ignites enthusiasm and interest in you? Why would anyone want to play him other than our 2, established Imperial Guard options?
Well, one of the things I'm excited about that he's coming out in the Planetfall pack is that he's going to be he's the first warlord that's going to interact with the type of planet. In his case, it's the green.
Right.
So seeing that and what that's going to open up, I think it's very exciting to me. That was always one of the things when we first started playing the game and looking at the different icons and whether they're material or strong point. And it was going to be, the idea was this will be cool if they start doing something with this later, and right. This is not just a win condition, and now they are, and it's going to be, I think it's going to be phenomenal.
Well, I definitely like seeing a little bit more design space than they're just colors on the card. Right. The fact that it's called Strong Point and it's supposed to represent like the bastions, the strongholds of the dug-in Imperial Guard where they can, sit and survive some kind of enormous onslaught, and they start to get combat benefits from being present at that planet.
Right, yeah, just these mass, in my mind's eye, you just see these massive fortresses and embankments that are, that were built thousands of years before, and they just have kind of existed, but yet they're just, they don't know how to build them now, but they have. I'm just so excited to see these things. It's almost like attacking a mountain fortress in my mind. So
definitely, it makes me very, very curious to see what other kind of effects we're going to see concerning material, red, or technology, blue. Mm-hmm. But just in regard to having an exciting new warlord. Granted, he's going to do his absolute best when he happens to be sitting at a planet that has that green stronghold icon, but what do you feel some of his greatest strengths are? Like, what are his areas of just greatest power?
Well, so his ability, there are a couple of them. There's one that any battle that he's involved in, army units can't retreat from the planet. Army units that retreat from the planet are destroyed instead. So that anything he's involved in personally is going to be down to the death.
Right.
Because even if you try to save him for later, well, there's no option. His other ability, though, with each other Astra Militarum unit you control at a green planet gets +1 attack, and then gains cannot be retreated or be routed. So that's always on, no matter where he is on the board, as long as you have units at green planets, and obviously there's 6 planets that have the green icons, just like the way they've split them up.
Sure.
And having that there, you're adding the guardsmen, or the Astra Militarum units have always been well costed for what they do. A lot of times there'll be a 2 resource unit, 2 resource cost unit has 2 attack, 2 life, or 1 attack, 2 life. Getting that extra +1 attack at these strong point planets kind of gives them a little bit more oomph. So they should be able to handle other bigger costed units. One of the things about the Space Marines, I always thought that they're always just a little bit tougher than the units they would normally match up against. So they survive where they're able to kill everything else. Now all of a sudden, the Astra Militarum units have enough firepower that they are going to be able to take out the Daring Assault Squad or the Tactical Squad Cardenas the Honored Librarian in without having to use multiple units. Just one unit will be able to do that.
Right. I mean, it definitely boosts up their efficiency, and the fact that you can start filling the board with such significant numbers and then derive that +1 attack power as many times as possible definitely seems like there's some serious potential there to just conjure up enormous amounts of attack and destroy much more expensive units in return. I think it's definitely noteworthy that it also affects all units and not just army units.
Mm-hmm.
And seeing as how each of our warlords so far has a kind of convenient, simple means of supplementing their army with tokens, that just seems absolutely superb.
Yeah, so guardsman tokens are going to turn from a 1/2 into a 2/2 at these green planets. You know, and then of course Astra Militarum always has all the range shenanigans that people need to watch out for with the preemptive barrage that allows you to give 3 Astra Militarum units you control at the same planet and give them all ranged. So now instead of saying, okay, well, I'm gonna there's some guardsmen, there's an Iron Guard recruit who's a 1/2, or maybe even a Mystic Warden who maybe who's a 2/2, and you're doing your opponent's doing the math like I should be able to shield that or survive this, and now all of a sudden that math is off because now all your 1/2s are 2/2s, all your 2s are 3s. If you do happen to have a 3, there are 4. So it's going to be it's really I think makes the Astra Militarum at those strong point planets much more dangerous and harder to dig out, and that's the way it should be. You know, in the lore-wise, in the canon there. You know, once the Astra Militarum is able to get dug in, they're pretty tenacious.
Well, most definitely. I suppose, you know, for that reason, because you can conjure up big numbers when it comes to attack power, because you've got the benefit of numbers of bodies on the playing field, just, you know, due in part to the Astra Militarum faction, due in part to being able to fill the board with those guardsman tokens, potentially, recurring guardsman tokens. Do you feel that there are going to be any specific warlords or factions that Broderick War may do very well against or kind of excel against?
I think he will do well against Space Marines. That's always a very popular faction you see in tournaments and just in general play, because Space Marines are cool. You know, they're basically big walking demigods of war. And now the one thing that I've always felt that for what they put out in cost, they're real tough. Now you can you normally had to out unit them, but now not only can you out unit them with the Astra Militarum because everything's so much less expensive, but you are hitting on the same level as they are. So I think that'll give him an edge there. Against Eldar and Dark Eldar, especially Dark Eldar with Packmaster Kith, you always end up facing usually a lot of units, small units that come out, and so they usually are able to swarm their opponent. Well, Astra Militarum, I feel, can do the same thing, so they can stay with them unit for unit. And now, again, they're hitting hard enough to kill some of those higher costed units that you would need to take 2 or 3 or maybe even 4 units to take out. That now you're only having to hit them with 1 or 2.
Sure.
So that leaves you to be able to mop up a little bit more. So I'm excited about that.
Well, I suppose just on the topic of, say, strengths and weaknesses, it's kind of an interesting double-edged sword in that he prevents his own units from retreating when he's present. Well, he doesn't prevent them from retreating, he destroys them if they do retreat, but the same can be said for your enemy's units.
Right.
How do you think players can try to make sure that that's a strength and not a huge, you know, area for you to be exploited and just this massive vulnerability?
Being able to bring in additional units with staging ground would definitely help Astra Militarum. You also have, if you ally with the Space Marines, there's the Eager Recruit that you can ambush out. So that being able to, let's say if you're going to go to a second round of combat and you do want to go ahead and retreat Broderick, well then you're going to have to go through another round of combat, obviously, but before you can retreat any more units, and they won't be destroyed. But with staging ground and some of the ambush tactics, being able to Elysium Assault Team is another great one for the Astra Militarum. When a soldier or a warrior is destroyed or killed by an attack, you can drop them in.
Sure.
I believe Drop Pod Assault is actually loyal to Space Marines, so you can't have them.
Right.
But staging ground kind of gives you that ability as long as you have the resources to pay. But the nice thing about Astra Militarum is that there's a couple of cards that are 0 cost. Mystic Warden being one of them we mentioned, which is a 2/2 for 0. But another one is Penal Legionnaire, who's a 0 cost. And once you start combining that with adding the +1 from Broderick, and then possibly also combined with a Catachan Outpost that you can exhaust and give another unit +2 attack, you can really have a surprising amount of firepower for very, very cheap cost. It really is kind of a glass cannon. You're putting these guys out there knowing they're going to die. Mystic Warden is destroyed at the end. Penal Legionnaire obviously has just the 1 health. But it's really more of, I'm going to blow the enemy up, and no matter what the cost.
Right, exactly. And I mean, if you can walk away from a battle with having destroyed 15 resources of units with 8 or 9 resources, that's still, a net benefit for you.
Right, right.
Even if you do accrue some losses around the way. And when you talk about, manipulating the math of combat in your favor, for all the additional deployment options you mentioned, those are absolutely fantastic means. I think Broderick War's signature event, that summary execution,
yes,
is going to be an absolutely fantastic way to surprise your opponent with, like, hey, kind of similar to the Eldar Empower. You weren't expecting it, but all these bodies on the table all of a sudden hit for all the harder, and you've maybe overextended yourself at this planet at this point, and if you retreat, all your units are going to die anyways. So,
right. And it could be any unit that you use the summary execution on. Even if you're taking something in like a Void Pirate that normally wouldn't have any attack,
right?
And wouldn't benefit from Broderick's ability, because it's not an Astra Militarum unit. Well, you summary execution the Void Pirate, and then you're able to put that green icon temporarily on the planet, and everybody benefits. So that's going to be great. When you also combine it with his bolt pistol, his signature attachment, the Commissarial bolt pistol, you have to attach it to a Commissar unit. Right now he's the only one in play, but also since it's his signature, you're not going to be able to obviously put it with any other Commissar Warlord. But the attached unit gets +1 attack, and then after an army unit you control at this planet leaves play, deal 1 damage to target army unit at this planet.
Right.
So if you are sacrificing, and there's some units out of Astra Militarum that when you sacrifice them, there's a benefit, like the Engine Seer Augur. You're able to look at your tops, when he leaves play, you're able to look at the top 6 cards and put any Astra Militarum support, thank you, into play, as long as it's two cost or less.
Right.
And then there's also the Inquisitor Acolyte, who when he leaves play you get to draw 2 cards. So if you're sacrificing those guys, especially if you've used them and they're already exhausted, you're able to draw those benefits. So I think that's really cool. It's one of the things that we saw with Kotias that he did a lot of, and now you're still able to do that with Broderick War, sacrificing these units and still getting the benefits of possibly more cards. All of a sudden, all your units are stronger, and now you may be able to get to do 1 damage to another army unit if he's got his attachment. So that's pretty exciting.
Definitely. I mean, I really like that it's when a unit leaves play, it doesn't penalize you for sacrificing units.
Hmm.
If it's your units being destroyed, that also allows this effect to trigger.
Hmm.
I think a fantastic combo is that Captain Marcus, just because you can sacrifice some, maybe already exhausted unit of your own. You can ping some enemy combatant, and the amount of damage you could output is just absurd. Or, at the very least, it's a ton of pressure for your opponent to shield, and at that point, they're losing events, they're losing attachments, just to keep their guys alive. So, it's, I think, fantastic.
Right.
And then that Captain Marcus thing, in allowing you to tap out some of your opponent's army, it can make sure that those biggest threats to bloodying your warlord are knocked out of commission early. But on the topic of bloodied warlords, what do you feel might be some of the biggest areas of weakness or vulnerability for Broderick?
Well, since his ability doesn't only affects attack, doesn't give him like a +1 to health as well, the Astra Militarum units are not as robust. So I think their ability is that they're able to out-unit other warlords, or I'm sorry, other factions. So anything where if you let an area effect go off, that's going to wipe your planet, whether it's the Vicious Bloodletter or the Daring Assault Squad, who can do an area effect for 2, or some of the other Tyranids that might come out with the Heavy Venomthrope Cannon that you can put on an elite,
right?
That you can choose for area effect. That's always going to be problematic. So you're going to have the tools to deal with that, maybe or at least delay that. And Astra Militarum has a lot of that. The Inquisitional Fortress is a resource that you can I'm sorry, not a resource, but a support that you'll be able to exhaust and sacrifice and rout another unit, a target army unit. So when there are those types of units at the planet that that you can't either deal with in the ranged phase or exhaust via Commander Marcus, then I think there's still some other tricks that Astra Militarum has to be able to deal with that. But it's always one of the things that you're always going to have to watch out for when you play low cost and low health units.
Well, definitely. I suppose, just given your significant background in playing the Astra Militarum faction, I believe you've got quite a bit of practice with playing Kotiaz.
Mm-hmm.
How do you kind of envision playing a game as Broderick? Like, what might your general strategy from the start be, given his, predilection towards strong point planets?
Well, so in the planet layout, worst case scenario is that you're only going to see one planet that could be green, because there's 6 other planets. I'm sorry, there's 6 planets that have green icons.
Right.
So there's 4 planets that could come out that won't have the green icons. So you're only going to have the 1, and the other 2 green icons are your 6 and 7. So that's worst case scenario.
Right.
I would imagine that doesn't happen often. At least I'm going to hope when I'm playing it. But usually, the plan I'm going to have is like the Sanctioned Psyker, which is a 2-cost 0/4 unit that most Astra Militarum decks use to help win command.
Right.
I want to put that on a green planet, because now all of a sudden he's a 1/4, and he's going to be tough to deal with, and he's going to be ideally winning me command. I think the layout with Astra Militarum, you're going to want to, depending on how your deck has built, and one of the things I do love about Astra Militarum is I think you can actually build a variety of type of decks. If you are going to use a lot of the tricks with Preemptive Barrage, they only target Astra Militarum units, so you might even want to, if you're not doing a monofaction Astra Militarum unit, Astra Militarum deck, then maybe at least most of the units, if not all the units, are at least Astra Militarum, because they're going to benefit from Broderick's ability. They're going to benefit from Preemptive Barrage, anything, cards like Noble Deed that require an Astra Militarum unit. I'm pretty sure Noble Deed requires Astra Militarum.
I believe so.
But So those kinds of effects are always something to be looking for in your opening hands, and for your opponents to be wary of. Astra Militarum, again, with preemptive barrage and some of the range units. Ideally, I think that's where they can shine. And there's a new card that's coming out in the Great Devourer for Astra Militarum. It's not loyal, but it's called Holy Fusillade, and it's another support. It's only one cost, but a reaction that after a combat round begins, exhausts the support to resolve the ranged skirmish at this battle. So essentially, you can actually have a second round of ranged combat.
Right.
Yeah. So, and the one thing about preemptive barrage is that when you target your 3 units, each targeting unit gains range until the end of phase. So anything that you have at the planet, and you play preemptive barrage, and you have your ranged encounter, and then anything that happens to survive combat, and you go to the next round, you can play this Holy Fusillade, and those units, if they're still there, have ranged again, and you're having to go through that. So that's, I think that is a really great lore-wise, and because you're seeing these range units just begin pounding on the enemy as they advance, and then after the enemy's engaged, maybe these units get pulled back and set up again. So then the Astra Militarum units either move or shift left, or maybe they pull back a little bit to their fortifications, and the range starts in again. Just with some of the novels I've read by Abnett and all that, that I always see that in the battles, and it's just real reminiscent. Seeing that in the card game now is really cool.
Well, most definitely. And, you know, the AM faction as a whole just sees so many different embattlement type cards. It's a bit of a shame that a lot of their effects that are similar to those of other factions are played out as a support, in that it's ever so slightly more predictable than, say, an Archon's Terror in your opponent's hand, to see that Inquisitorial Fortress sitting there on the table. But all the same, it's kind of nice to instill maybe a small sense of fear in your opponent, like your staging ground. They know something can happen. They don't really know what it might be, but there's that threat there.
Exactly, and it brings in that bluffing aspect of any good hand of poker. Like, you know, you may be sitting there with 4 cards in hand, but none of them are units that are going to be able to you're going to be able to utilize with the staging ground. But the opponent doesn't know that, so they have to take that into account. And they're always, and I've often found that myself as a player, I can outwit myself very easily. I'm thinking that the opponent has this in hand, or they're going to do this, or I'm going to do this, and they're going to counter me with this. And how do I answer that? I'm already under the assumption that they have something in that they're going to be able to utilize, and that's not always true.
Right. Well, I suppose just maybe winding things back ever so slightly, what do you consider like some musts when it comes to deck construction for Broderick? Like, what are some staples that you see working particularly well with him?
With him, I'm definitely going to want to use the ranged. So some of the staples, I'm going to be bringing in the preemptive barrage. I'm going to be bringing in Rattling Deadeye, who is a 1/1 unit, 1 command icon, but he has a natural ranged, and the Catechin Outpost, because I want to hit first, no matter who has initiative.
Right.
You know, that I think that's always something that people who play Astra Militarum want to use. But with Strachan, he has to be at the planet, and he's only affecting soldiers or warriors. If you're using Kodiaz, again, he has to be at the planet, and you're sacrificing a unit to power his ability. With Broderick, he can be anywhere on the board, but if you're at a strong point planet, you know, I think you can lay down a lot of damage very, very quickly with very few units, and then still have units left over. So when the combat round starts, that not everybody's exhausted from the ranged phase, and you're just going to, now they've closed with you, and you're just taking a pounding and hoping somebody survives.
Right. And I suppose it just almost goes without saying, but I'll mention it anyways. All the attack power in the world on a unit won't do you any good if it's dead.
Right.
So it makes sense to distribute ranged among as many different units as you can. Something that I'm kind of surprised by is noticing how long we've already been talking. We haven't actually even touched on his relatively powerful signature army units, but what exactly do you see the most powerful use for that anxious infantry platoon being?
I think the most powerful effect you're going to have is deploying them at a strong point planet as well. The reason being is because they have that forced reaction that after a combat round at the planet ends, you may pay a resource. If you do not pay the resource, then you have to retreat the unit.
Right.
But if they're at a green planet, then because of Broderick's ability, they cannot be retreated, they cannot be routed. So you're getting a 3/3 army unit for only 2 resources.
Right.
And not having anything. If you have them anywhere else, or if they, and especially if they're with Broderick and you don't pay that resource and they end up retreating, either you can lose the battle, or if they're with Broderick, you're going to have to destroy the unit, and that's resources down the tubes and men down the tubes. You want to have those guys out there. So I think having them at a strong point planet is just so good.
Definitely. And I mean, in I suppose dire straits, if it just came down to they happen to be at the same planet as Broderick, there's some big prolonged combat taking place, you don't have the resources and you really need to keep them there, that's another instance where that signature event would be absolutely fantastic in allowing them to, stick around. And then who knows, since that card replaces itself, you might just end up drawing a shield or something equivalently useful.
Right.
I suppose just when it comes to, say, allied factions, you mentioned the eager recruit earlier. Do you think of him as more a Space Marines ally or orcs?
Again, I think it really depends on the type of deck. That's really one of the things I love about Astra Militarum. If you want to do something where you're just going to be spamming out as many cheap units as you can, I think Orc is the ally you want, because there's a lot of very strong 2-cost units from the Orcs that then you could use staging ground with. Plus also Orc has a resource called Ammo Depot, where it allow you, if you have 3 cards or less, that you can exhaust that and draw a card, and that's a phenomenal card. If you want to do something more of where Astra Militarum, I think they have 6 of the 2-cost signature events, because or 2-cost attachments or events, because there's the Bodyguard, there's Honorifica Imperialis, Preemptive Barrage, Emperor's Warrant, and 2 arms. So there's only 5, but still those are 5 events or attachments that you have 2 shield icons.
Right.
You have a unit like the Steel Legion Chimera, where if some other unit is attacked, it prevents 1 damage. You have the Bodyguard condition, where you have the forced reaction, where a unit you control is assigned damage by an attack. You reassign one of that damage to the attached unit. If you ally with Space Marines, you can have Blood Angel Veterans in there, where as long as they're ready, they'll prevent a damage that is either assigned or that they take from an attack.
Right.
So yeah, if you want to play bigger units, lots of shields, Rock Creek Bunker, Steel Legion Chimera, I think the Space Marines are the way to go. And so that's exciting, and just having that kind of flexibility, or even if you just want to play straight Astra Militarum, I think they stand well on their own as well. And just maybe or just bring in Space Marines to only have some of the attachments, or Exterminatus having those planet clearing capabilities if you want.
Well, sure.
But probably my favorite is probably Astra Militarum and Space Marine. Just I think I find that kind of iconic.
Right. I mean, it's definitely a little bit more fitting for the Imperial Guard to ally themselves with the Adeptus Astartes than the Green Tide.
Exactly. It's almost kind of just not something that you'd think would happen in the lore, that they'd always constantly be at odds, the humans and the orcs. But
sure,
just mechanic wise, the game has to have that ability.
Right. Well, I know the tabletop version of Warhammer 40k has like allies of desperation and different distinctions of that nature, where different factions suffer different penalties based on who they're allied with. Like, my understanding is, someone who's not played it in many years, is the Tyranids basically can't ally with anyone. The Space Marines obviously hate allying with any sort of alien faction, so the models actually, act like they don't trust one another, and it just screws everything up. But in this game, it's just kind of like, orcs rank and file with your Cadian troops. Just seems a little strange, but
right.
We've touched on a huge number of different combos, some of your favorite cards, deck building considerations, all sorts of other things. When it all comes down to it, it's speculation, it's conjecture, it's going to have so much to do with cards that we're not going to see for probably at least a couple months, if not more. Do you feel like Broderick has much potential at all to be competitive?
I do. I think because of his ability is going to affect units at planets instead of units that are with him. Like I said, Strachan, it only affects soldiers or warriors, and only with him.
Right.
I love Codiez, but I find that he starts off strong and he finishes strong. And at least the way I play him, where my game is weak, is right around planet 4 or 5. And because I've already burned through a lot of units and I haven't necessarily had the chance to replenish those.
Sure.
And that's usually where I find that most of the games end, is in planet 4 or 5. I've won 2 planets, they've won 2 planets, or I've won 1 and they've won 2, and planet 4 is a winning condition for them.
Right.
I'm forced to go there, and I don't have enough oomph to really put up an effective struggle. I think with Broderick, that is no longer the case, because especially if it's a green planet, you're still going to have that there. If it's not a green planet, you can still send him there. And if you have some of the cards like Noble Deed, for example, if he's equipped with his bolter pistol, and you have Noble Deed, which will you sacrifice Astra Militarum unit, and you're able to do printed attack cost to an enemy unit, well, then the bolter pistol will do another point of damage.
Right.
So all of a sudden you might have 2 or 3 that you can just kind of put out there and get rid of the unit that they were relying on. So I think I think he's going to stay strong throughout the whole play phase, and he's going to have a strong early game, going to have a strong mid game, and have a strong end game, which is kind of where Astra Militarum maybe right now hasn't had that consistency.
Sure. Well, I suppose when it all comes down to it, for players that find themselves running up against Broderick, what do you feel some advice or suggestions might be, just to make sure that he doesn't, manage to absolutely decimate them in the ranged phase, or constantly be fighting battles at green planets and just, filling the table with these immensely high value units because of those boosted stats?
Right. I think the trick to beating him is limiting the card draw that Broderick's going to be able to get. Of course, if you're dominating in command phase and you're winning resources, winning cards, ideally you should win the game no matter what. Or I should say, chances are very good you're going to win the game.
Right.
But if you really limit the Astra Militarum, you pointed out earlier, most of their stuff that comes out is in the form of support cards that are on the table. So
right.
If they don't have them on the table, there's very few things you're going to be able to play from hand. Preemptive Barrage is one of them. The Holy Fusillade is another. I'm sorry, no, not the Holy Fusillade, but the Elysium Assault Team is another. But if they don't have those supports on the table, then okay, there's not too many things that that's going to get thrown at me that is going to be a surprise, and you can kind of really kind of see how the battle's going to play out without a lot of surprises. So limiting their card draw is always going to be really, really key. If you have the opportunity to either win command at a planet that maybe gives you a couple of resources, or even just stagnate the command at a planet that would allow your opponent to draw 2 cards, my plan would be to actually stagnate that command, because if I go to another round, I'm always going to get 4 more resources. Whereas as long as I can keep cards out of their hand and they can't play that stuff on me, I should win this battle, hopefully.
Sure. And I mean, just when you're talking about limiting card draw, when I think of the Astra Militarum, I don't necessarily think like individual powerful cards, but really the combination of a lot of different effects that all come together and are as a group powerful. But if you can't bring all those combo pieces to bear, it's just kind of a lot of individual effects that might kind of flounder.
Exactly. Or you're able to weather them a little bit better.
Exactly.
So
I suppose really the last thing I wanted to ask, just because I think we've skipped it thus far, is do you feel like, you know, so many of the signature supports in this game are terrifying to see, like a first turn Chimera Den will make even the, you know, most battle-hardened of players die a little inside. Do you feel like the forward barracks that constantly adds guardsman tokens to play, you know, each and every ending combat round, do you feel like that's going to be one of these awful supports people just dread seeing?
Yes. Yes, because it works even if there's the only thing left is a guardsman token.
Right.
It'll spawn another guardsman token as long as there's an Astra Militarum unit at that planet. And as we've seen with a lot of the other supports, Catachin Outpost, you're able, with Broderick's ability, all of a sudden, you know, that's another 2/2 unit, or possibly a 3/2 or even a 4/2 unit that is at the table that you're going to have to deal with. And then if they have the tricks for preemptive barrage, or the Holy Fusillade is on the table, you're like, geez, you know, I'm going to be getting pounded at ranged again by these units that are hitting for 3/4, which should be probably enough to, I mean, 4, as long as it's not shielded, will kill a possessed.
Sure.
So,
well, and speaking of shields, if, you know, there's a prolonged battle and those guardsman tokens start to accumulate, or even if they're, you know, initially small in number, like you and your opponent have basically battled to a stalemate, so long as you're able to shield that last remaining guardsman token and it survives, all of a sudden it has company, and then the company has company, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I think it could really snowball. So I think that's one of those. It's one of those supports I would love to see hit when I'm playing Broderick, and would hate to see when I'm playing against him. Just like the Chimera Den when you're playing Kith, you just don't want to see it.
Most definitely. Well, I'll be sure to include a Clogged with Corpses in all my Tyranid decks, just for you. But I suppose before we kind of close things down here, any final thoughts about Broderick that you'd like to get off your chest?
I am very, very excited about the fact that he's interacting with the planet icons, and I believe that the idea behind Planetfall, we'll see a lot more of that. So it's going to be, hopefully he's just the precursor as to what we'll see come out. I mean, one of the things that I would love to see out of Astra Militarum is a card that is equivalent of a founding. And a founding, when you read the chapter books by Abnett, or the Gaunt's Ghost books by Abnett, he talks about the founding of the Tanith battalion. So it's the planet Tanith, and they're forming a brand new army battalion, or I'm sorry, army unit. So it would be great if there was a card like that, let's say maybe at all red planets in play or all blue planets in play, you'd put a guardsman token into play. Kind of like the Snotling attack will spawn 4 Snotlings. Right. Or there's a Tyranid card that will put Tyranid tokens into, Termagant tokens into play. Having something like that in Astra Militarum would be really cool, I think. You know, lore-wise, it really would tie in well.
Definitely.
And that's one of the things that I love most about the game is in what I've been exploring with the lore and how it ties in the game for me.
Sure.
So seeing that would be just awesome.
Well,
so Brad, if you're listening, there's an idea.
I was just going to say, throughout this entire interview today, it has me like jonesing for some sort of, you know, Traxis Sector crossover where we just delve ultra deep into the lore and hypothesize all sorts of card possibilities, just because it's too much fun. I love the 40k universe. The game is great, but it just oozes theme, and it's wonderful.
Yeah, I'll get that. I'll get together with Tobin and Carl on that. It's like, all right, Carl, this is the idea that Mitch came up with the Hive Tyrant demands this.
Sounds great.
And
Sounds
I think that would be fun.
Most definitely. But I suppose before we conclude things, why don't you plug your podcast one last time? And I'll be sure to include relevant links in the video description. But where can people listen to you, John?
They can listen to us on iTunes, or it's also hosted at the Team Covenant website. Again, I'm part of the Traxis Sector War Cast. We do have a Facebook page that people can contact us on. We love hearing from people. We love meeting new people at tournaments. Hopefully, you're able to come down, or we're able to be out at some of the more national ones if you're outside of Colorado. And please say hi. We'd love to meet you. Snap a picture with you.
Well, sounds awesome. And I even saw the T-shirts you guys had made for Gen Con. Those were absolutely fantastic. So
thank you. Tobin had that up, and I'm like, oh yeah, man, we got to do that. That's awesome.
That's fantastic. Maybe if I go to Gen Con next year, I'll cosplay as a Hormigaunt or something. But I suppose I'll just say thank you very much for your time, John. It's been an absolute pleasure finally getting to speak to you. So
yes, Mitch, I've enjoyed your work, and man, I'm very excited to finally get to do this. It's been great. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, awesome. Thank you very much, and have an excellent evening, good sir.
You too, sir. Thank you very much.
Well, with our interview having ultimately drawn to a close, I'll just conclude this video by saying thank you once again for watching, and be sure to leave a comment sharing your own thoughts, opinion, and perspective when it comes to speculation regarding not just Broderick War, but the Planetfall cycle Astra Militarum faction as a whole. Interaction with viewers like you continues to be the absolute highlight of my creating content for this channel, so please take a moment to let me know not just what you thought of this interview, but what Warlord you'd like to see next, what kind of content you'd like to see coming out of this channel, and if you happen to know someone that might make a good candidate to guest star in a future interview, then I strongly encourage you to share. But with that said, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel if you've not done so already. Feel free to contact me directly and keep in touch through any form of social media you'd like. But in any case, thank you very much for watching, and be sure to check back in again soon for ever more Conquest content to come.